I am California of the past.
I am California of the past.
I
I am California of the past.
Hi, my name's Barbara Halliday. I was born in Wilmington, Delaware, and I lived on the East Coast for about almost the first 30 years of my life. But then in 1979, I moved to California, and I moved initially to San Francisco, where I met my husband, Rick Emsdahl. We got married, and in late 1985, we started looking for a house to buy, and I was working in San Francisco, he was working in Palo Alto, and we found a house in Hayward, kind of in between the two, but across the bay, and we moved here in early 1986. And we moved to the Southgate neighborhood of Hayward. And I guess now I've probably lived here close to a quarter of a century, and I think that, as happens with anyone, I guess I've sort of become a part of the history in my own way, a part of the history of Hayward. So I'm here to talk about that a little bit, about the role I've played in Hayward's development in the past 25 or so years. And then I'd also like to talk about one particular project that is actually in the process of being built right now as we speak, but that's been around for about 20 years as a kind of controversial project in Hayward, and the role I played in it, and that's the 880-92 interchange. But first I'll just say that when I moved to Hayward in 1986, one of the first things I got involved in was my local homeowners association, the Southgate Homeowners Association, and through that also an organization called the Southgate Swim Club, and I started learning a lot about my neighborhood. One of the things I learned was that the area I lived in had not always been a part of Hayward. It had once been Mount Eden, but when the post-World War II housing boom occurred, a lot of that land around in that area was annexed to Hayward. I had been a newspaper reporter, and I've always been interested in planning issues, so I started to follow planning issues in the city and became politically active. And in 1990, I was appointed to the Citizens Advisory Commission of Hayward, and in 1996, I was appointed to the Planning Commission, served on that for 8 years, and then I was elected to the City Council in 2004, and I've been serving on that for the past 5 years. So during that time, I've seen a lot of development in Hayward, something that was eventually adopted by the City Council, our urban limit line. So we set the limit for how far we were going to grow, and we have protected a lot of our shoreline and our hills, which I think is a really good thing, but also have compromised on some newer developments that have become nice new developments in our city, including the East Eden Shores development and the new Stonebrae Country Club development up in the hills. And over the years, those issues that citizens were very active in trying to preserve open space around the edges of the city and keep development kind of at a low density. But I think the trend has changed now, and now we are very much promoting higher density development, but in places that are close to our two BART stations in the city and other transit corridors, so that people can get along a lot more without cars by using transit or by living in a place that has a mixed development, so that they can have their neighborhood services within walking distance. So that's how planning issues in Hayward have evolved, I would say, over the last 25 years. And we are looking, one of the more recent developments that I looked at as a member of the City Council was a project by the former football star Joe Montana, who is proposing some higher density development near the South Hayward BART station off Tennyson Road. But one of the things that I think I was involved in over this time that it was one of the more interesting projects and directly affected me as a member of the Southgate neighborhood was the rebuilding of the 880-92 interchange. Now, when we moved to Hayward, we saw the house in the Southgate development that we eventually decided to buy, and it seemed like it was just a nice house set kind of in the back of a neighborhood. Although when I got home, I looked at a map and I realized that the exact location of this house appeared to be right at the crossroads of Interstate 880 and and California Road 92, which is the extension of the San Mateo Bridge in through Hayward, a very major interchange. And I thought, well, this is going to be interesting. At the time, we had trees and a fence behind our house. Later, a sound wall was built, but we still do very much hear the noise of the freeway behind us. We sometimes call it Nimitz Falls. Well, in 1991, I was actually serving at that time as president of the Southgate Homeowners Association, and we got an announcement that Caltrans was going to have a major meeting at the Mount Eden High School to show what their plans were for rebuilding this, what was then a cloverleaf interchange of these two major roads. And I'll tell you that the initial reaction of almost the entire neighborhood unanimously was one of shock and horror at what Caltrans was proposing at the time. It really was a project that would have involved taking more than 200 homes in 4 neighborhoods and the 4 corners of this interchange. And so what was being proposed not only would have taken an enormous amount of property, people's homes, displaced people, it also, the Caltrans was proposing a 90-foot high flyover that would have really, I think, been visible from many points in the remaining the remaining homes in the neighborhoods, and would have been very noisy and disruptive and an eyesore, and people were not happy. We had an initial meeting at a church in Kellogg Avenue in the Southgate neighborhood, and the fire marshal had to come and actually make people leave and stand outside. There were so many people who attended. The neighborhood was very angry about this. Caltrans people were there, and people from the city council heard us and established a formal committee called the 88092 Citizens Advisory Committee to work with Caltrans and to help the city council deal with this issue and these proposals. And that committee started meeting in the fall of 1991 and didn't disband until 2002, or 11 years later, when an agreement was finally reached on how the project would ultimately be built. And the profile of the 90-foot flyover has been lowered so that the project is not as extensive as once proposed, not as high, not as much of a visual blight. But I think the jury is still out on how it's ultimately going to affect our neighborhood and what it's really going to look like from various. Already I can see that from what's been built already, some views have changed dramatically in the neighborhood, but I guess that's progress. So I've very much enjoyed my service on that committee, being part of my neighborhood, and now being part of the city council as we grapple with some very serious budget problems here in the latter part of the first decade of the 21st century, and like cities throughout the country and world, I guess, we're really having to take a serious look at how we operate and do things more efficiently. I guess whatever times you live in, they're interesting and they present challenges, and it's just fun working with other people in Hayward to try to solve the problems we have and meet those challenges.